Welcome to NorCal Slot Car Scene. Earlier in the week, I did a race report on the CanAm event held at Electric Dreams in Southern California. The race was a huge success, with 20 cars entered. I prepared two cars for this race, both Thunderslot McLaren M6s. During practice, it was obvious that the red McLaren was the better of the two cars, and that's the one I chose to race. Here's a look at the car with the body off so you can get an idea of what modifications that I made. Before we get into the actual setup of the car, here are the parts that I added or changed from the original Thunderslot kit. Because the track at Electric Dreams is a wood track and we're running without magnets, I chose the Thunderslot Gray Hard chassis and the Thunderslot Gray Hard motor pod. The rules at Electric Dreams allow for hollow axles and ball bearings, something that we're not used to in Northern California, but can definitely make the car faster. Now let's take a look at each of these parts individually and how I set the car up. I chose the NSR wood guide primarily because the Thunderslot wood guides were not available at the time. When you run the lead wire from the motor up to the front of the chassis into the guide, use silicone adhesive to keep the lead wires attached to the chassis using the built-in holders. Make sure you form a nice loop with the lead wire. This will allow the guide to spring back straight and be much easier to marshal. When I set up the guide, I got the correct ride height without any spacers at all between the guide and the chassis. And with 19mm rear tires, I got the ride height I was looking for. I tried using washers to dampen the movement between the motor pod and the chassis for the first time. The Thunderslot washers were too thick, so I used one, split it in half, and used half on each side of the car. There's about 20 thousandths worth of play before the motor pod actually hits the washer to cause the damping effect. The motor that was required for this race was the NSR Sidewinder 21.5K motor that comes with a Porsche 908. I started testing with a 12:32 gear ratio, but finally settled on a 12:30, which seemed to be the best for this track. Mike Andrews from Silicon City Speedway said he tried using the body adjustment screws on the side of the chassis and it made the car better. Using those 4 adjustment screws allows the body to float much freer fore and aft than it does on the standard body mounts. After a lot of testing, I ended up using my normal NSR 5206 Super Grip tires on standard Thunderslot wheels. During testing, I tried an identical set of tires and wheels, but also using a Thunderslot foam insert. The tires with the inserts didn't develop the side bite as the tires without the inserts, and were about 0.2 of a second a lap slower. I used my normal weighting setup throughout the weekend. 5 grams of lead in front of the motor and 2 grams on each side of the chassis. Overall, the car weighed just under 68 grams ready to race. Here's a view of the bottom of the chassis and another view of the top of the chassis showing all the components. This car was incredibly fast, but more than that, it was easy to drive. I was able to run the entire 18-minute race with only one D-slot. That's a close-up look at my winning Thunderslot McLaren M6. Thanks for watching. This is Jim Rose with NorCal Slot Car Scene.